Hey there, independent Scientologists. Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the Theta meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 9, episode 9, and episode 100 of the AOGP podcast. Woohoo! Yay! Yay! 100 episodes. It is a watershed moment. So I thought we would do, and I've been trying to persuade our co-hosts here to do this one because I thought it would be a good one to do. It's light and airy and fun. All Thetans are creative. They like to be creative. And that's what a Thetan does is primary drive in the axioms, Scientology axioms is of a Thetan is to cause and effect. And that is to be creative. So I thought we would do a podcast, an aesthetic uptone, high end of the tone scale podcast about creativity. Now, what about creativity? Well, what is creativity and how do you go about it? And what effect does it have on you when you want to be creative about something? Scientologirl. Hi, by the way.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good afternoon, Artie. You're eight hours.
Good morning. Good
ahead
morning.
of us.
Yes.
Both these guys are tired, so I'm gonna try and creatively inspire them with this. So how do you guys feel as beings impinging upon the physical universe when you get the creative bug? You want to go first, Scientologirl?
Okay. Well, how I feel is, well, it's kind of odd. Like if I'm really like being creative, like for me, because I'm an artist and that's my job. There's two types. There's one where it's just, okay, God, I've got to drag on, and I'm not really being there and being comfortable because I've done this like so many times and it's pretty much boring.
This is your job.
Right. And then there's the other time where I'm doing something new. I'm learning a new brush or a new skill. And then it's like 10 hours can pass and I have skipped lunch and it has just been like this in the zone thing. And, like time doesn't exist kind of a thing. And everything's just flowing and it's wonderful. So, obviously, I think that would be being in aesthetics, that second one. And then the first one would probably be, I don't know, maybe disinterest, boredom, monotony.
So you said when you get a new, because you're a digital designer and you use the iPad app Procreate, to do what you do as an artist in your business.
Mm-hmm.
Now you mentioned, and I thought that it might be an interesting point as far as start, change, stop, which is a cycle of action: create, survive, persist, destroy. Same thing. That you mentioned when you get a new brush. What was the other thing you said?
Learn a new skill.
Learn a new skill. Now, to me, that's different. That's different. And Artie, I'm gonna ask you the same thing. But if you're learning a new skill, is that creativity?
Yeah, I think
how?
so. Well, you're learning a new skill to be creative, so it kind of falls all in one umbrella, really.
Mm-hmm.
But not just that. I think that if you learn anything, like, look, how I feel about creativity is that everybody is being creative at every point in time.
Absolutely, and we're going to get to that.
Right. So, in terms of that, I would say, it's just whenever you're learning, you're being creative. So that's how I would feel about that.
That's interesting. And Artie just mentioned, he said, what about doing a podcast on word clearing? There's a tie-in. Hidden Easter egg. But more on that in a few minutes. So I guess what I'm asking is learning creativity beyond?
Yes.
You learn how to use a new brush and Procreate with your Apple Pencil on your iPad, as opposed to you creating a new design. But aren't they the same thing, or are they different?
I would say they're pretty much the same thing. It's just that, um, wow, I guess the one deals with pictures and stuff, but it,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily mean that that's better than another. It's just I think we on planet Earth have defined it as something different.
Mm-hmm.
The layman would say, "Oh, you're so creative," to an artist, but not, "Oh, you're so creative," to an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, accountancy, you're not well, you are technically taking
Right.
something and then putting it in the
Right. So learning a new skill and something that you already know how to do is exciting and fun
yeah,
to you. Okay.
right.
Now we'll
Mm,
circle back on that. Artie, how about you?
mm-hmm. I love being creative. It, it it gives me focus. It gives me a goal. There's a sense of achievement attached to it. Um, and it's an interesting word, this word creativity, because it has many phases attached to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's interesting that you've chosen this word specifically. Can
Well,
I put my 2 cents to it?
yeah,
Kick it off a bit.
well, that's what I'm asking is when somebody when you're creative, there's almost this overwhelming sense of I can't wait to get started. There's
Mm,
this, champing at the bit of, it's like when the dogs, we let the dogs in and we've been out for the day and the dogs are just so excited and they're just, oh, jumping all over the place and they just can't wait to, and there's that feeling
yeah.
as a being when you get creative that you, you just forget coffee. I'm just sitting down. I'm get started.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
That's
It's like a complete
creativity.
oneness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's like LRH talks about the joy of creating, splurge on it, because
Mm,
that is the probably the pinnacle of to where we ended off in the last podcast, the pinnacle of what's fun about being in the physical universe.
Right.
That's the funnest thing it
and
could
and
be.
and everything that we've created has been through forms of creativity,
Yeah.
from science to art to music to film to food, to transport, um, leisure. Everything is, is
Mhm.
is based around creativity to some degree, or
Yeah.
if not literally.
Yeah,
I mean,
the places you could eat, the things we could see. I mean, to me, I look at that and I see that when I look at it, it doesn't sound nearly as fun as creativity involves the unknown.
mm,
What were you going to say?
Mm,
I was going to say that we could even get as far as going into the metaphysical slash spiritual side and being like, well, what does the Thetan do? What are we doing here? Really, we're not a part of the universe, but we're creating the universe through postulates, right?
Right.
So
well,
That's
yeah.
that's
creativity. That's a
creativity.
postulate.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the word create here,
Hmm.
and the first definition, which ties completely in what you just said, bring something into existence.
Wow. That's interesting.
Right, and that's all a Thetan does is bring something into existence. You're with a postulate with the decision of I am in beingness. That's creativity right there.
Yeah.
Right there. What is
Yep.
it that you
Yep.
are? What are you being? Well, that's exciting and fun in and of itself. But when you get down to it, I mean, is it and this is an interesting point. Is creativity and beingness selfish?
Why would it be selfish?
Ooh, yeah.
Well, let me give you an example.
Is selfish a real word?
Is it well, it's in the
Are the
dictionary.
letters that make up selfish real letters?
Right. Right. Those sounds, are they something? Well, I'm just saying, is it selfish because when like with okay, I'm going to go into the second dynamic for a second. When when you're in when it's love, with a person, and we're going to talk about whatever it is that you're creating, are you into somebody because they're into you? And I'm looking at it from that angle. Is that selfish when you're doing your creativity and you're creating something for yourself? Are you being selfish, or is it cool and okay?
I think it's cool and okay. Just like with everything, life, it's necessary to have a balance. So yes, you could spend the day on yourself. I mean, there are a lot of people, and I mean, when you go shower, is that selfish? No, because you have a first
No, you
dynamic,
need to go shower because you
right?
stink.
So,
The royal you, not
thanks.
you, the royal you. Right.
But
You need to do that. And that is itself creativity, right, Artie? I mean, you got to put a create on the body, otherwise it doesn't stick around. That's how everything is you have to alter, per the axioms, you have to alter things in order for them to persist. So that's why I said, is it
Yes.
selfish? So that's to your point, is it a real word?
Well, looking at the word,
Hmm?
lacking consideration for other people, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. Now, I mean, even just looking at that definition, aren't we all selfish?
Oops. Well, we all are selfish to a certain degree, but you have to take care of thyself
yeah,
as well, and taking care of yourself. And maybe this will help clarify what I'm saying. Is the more creative you are, the well, I'll back it up a little bit. I have a relative who's very creative and just wants to talk about everything that they're creating. Okay. So to me, that's probably why I asked, is
right.
is because let me tell you about me.
Yeah.
But the neatest
Sure,
people,
sure.
the neatest people that I've ever met who were creative, highly creative, were the neatest people I've ever met. And they had the
Sure.
the, the best beingness towards, to your point last podcast, of serenity of beingness, because they were really up there in aesthetics and everything, and they were fun and neat to be around, and there wasn't any invalidation or
Mm,
evaluation and that type of thing. So I just wanted to take a little side rail there and get
I,
your guys' input on it.
I feel like if it were to be selfish, I think you have to be a little selfish to be selfless. Because again, you have a first dynamic, and when you're happy, the people around you are happy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're treating yourself to aesthetics or creativity or whatever, the effects of that are going to be known around other people. I would much rather be around somebody who would
mm,
talk about their creativity and the things that they're doing and stuff. Not bragging, but just excited because they're learning and they're creating and stuff, rather than being around somebody who was destructive and just spoke about their problems and all of that.
mm-hmm,
So yeah, I definitely think that it is perfectly fine. But again, life requires a balance. So you are not going to be able to do that infinitely. You're going to have to focus on your other dynamics as well.
Right. And so, there has to be creativity across all dynamics, and I mean, I think to the degree that you just create in a selfish way, is to where, well, you kind of end up being a bit of a nut. I mean, you have these guys who were
mm,
incredibly creative in history, who are very well known artists, but they were all, well, I mean, let's Van Gogh. He didn't sell his first
mm.
painting until after he was dead, cut his own ear off,
Yeah, that's right.
things like that.
Yeah.
So, it isn't always pretty creativity, but to swing back around, the idea of being creative is, well, like, you show me a piece of your work or something like that, and when I give you the input, what's the noise you make when I tell you how great it is?
Eep.
Well, you go ahead. What do you? I'll say, that's beautiful, honey. That's really
uh,
professional. And you say, yeah. So,
You're not supposed to share that.
so, so,
Mm,
it is, like he says in the art series. Hubbard says in the art series, art is a what? what is it you're going for, and whatever art it is that you're doing, a communication.
Yeah.
If it gets the communication across, then the right thing is happening. If it doesn't get it across, and you show it to somebody and they go, what is it?
Right.
What happens? There's a bit of an ARC break there because it didn't communicate.
Yeah.
So that brings us next to the thing of well, if you just because you can doesn't mean you should. You need to learn how to be creative. And the first thing that and this, to your point about podcasts, Dollar H says the first thing you should do when you start any endeavor is clear the basic words of what it is that you're going to be doing and wearing that hat. You're still learning things about Procreate. Artie, you're still learning. What's the thing you've been creative on most recently outside of
Wood
Scientology?
turning.
Say again.
Yeah, wood turning.
Wood turning. Oh,
wood turning. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad's done a lot of that. So
yeah, I'm trying to make some tools, and it's a challenge, but it's exciting because every time I because I've got to wield metal, and I've never been very good with wielding metal, but I'm getting closer and closer, and it's getting more exciting to be able to get to that stage where I can turn a bowl using a completely different tool that's not on the market.
Right. So what is the important? I mean, you dive into something, and I really wanted to get into all of the aspects of creativity. And I know both you guys are creative, very creative. We're all creative beings, but to the initiate listener, what are the stumbling blocks that blunted that I just can't wait creativity for you when you get into something? What words of advice would you have to somebody who's hearing about creativity from a Thetan's perspective? What experience can you share?
I would say that listen to the previous podcast we had about the
Reactive mind.
yes, and go into the part where we mentioned the CDEI scale, because when you are learning anything, and to get to that creative stage and get past creative blocks and stuff like that, you've got to be higher up on the scale than lower. So creative block, I would say it's between inhibited, it can even be desired. You want something so bad, but it's just not coming, kind of a thing, But
maybe because you didn't understand the words, and there was a lot of terminology, like maybe with digital. Well, when I say digital creation, I mean, well, let's say it's software. I mean, that's the biggest thing when I'm looking into something is what's the learning curve that I'm looking at in trying to do something with a new piece of software. And sometimes it is just ridiculously daunting.
right,
It's a 2.5, 3 hour video on YouTube or whatever. And I mean, it's not a short endeavor. Computers may make things easier, but you've got to learn how to use what makes it easier before you can do anything with it. Like I said, to Procreate, you're still learning things. The other day you showed me.
Yeah, and I thought I had known it all.
Right. So Artie,
yeah.
anything?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Similar kind of thing where I think for me as well is, we're told at a young age as well, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then I think that pushes us as adults into a more socialized position. And I think we forget that as adults as well, nobody's there to tell us no anymore. Um, and I think we can easily lose creativity just from those kinds of dynamics as well. People
Yeah.
stop doing hobbies and just go to work and become robots.
Yeah.
Um,
Build
and
purposes.
they stop doing things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Picking up a drum kit like we were discussing before, or
right.
learning a musical instrument, and I think it's the learning part that gets in the way of it most of the time as well. The time it takes, like you want to learn the guitar, but man, to get to the stage where you can actually play a song could take you weeks.
Yeah, to get good at
Yeah.
it.
Well, then you're in desired again.
Yeah.
Right, then you're in desire.
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah,
to
you got to stay curious as
stay
best as you
curious.
can,
Yeah.
and clear up the basic definitions and everything like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're faced with um I became aware of a new digital image creation tool for with AI called Flux. We were watching TikTok, and so I Googled it the next day, and then I looked into it, and it's easier to get it installed than you might think. There's Pinocchio, which installs this thing, and it gives you a bunch of options of different AI, and it runs scripts and all of this. And I sat down and tried to do it on the Mac, and it wouldn't install on it because it needs particular amount of hardware. And a Mac Mini is great, but it's not great enough. So I went over to our Windows machine, which is great, and got into it. And I thought, Jesus, this is going to take a while because we're working on a new website.
Yeah.
We want great imagery, but I don't want to. I want it to be easier than using Midjourney. Well, turns out that this Pinocchio tool and Flux, and there's a ton of options. So I enlisted our nephew, who's a staff auditor, to look into it and spend a couple days digging deep into it, so that
Mm.
he understood and could explain it to me on what the best thing was to do with it.
Mm.
Now I want to be artistic with it, but we need to fine tune it because there are so many ways to do it with add-ons and all this stuff, and because it's quite technical. Whereas wood
Mm.
turning is technical too, but in a different way. And in Scientologirl
Yeah.
in
And same thing.
Scientologirls, it's
There's heaps to it as well. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can't just create
Yeah.
clip art. You can't just make a bowl. So you have to be
Yep.
understanding of that, and that's one of the points that I wanted to make in being creative is don't let something blunt your creativity because you're approaching it on, wait for it, student hat tech, basic study course tech,
Yeah.
too steep
Yep.
of a gradient.
Mm.
That will
Yep.
blow you out of the water, very much to your point of failed purpose. You're not going to pick up a guitar and
Mm.
play a song within the first hour. Ain't going to happen.
Well,
Yep.
I think people, and I mean, I am people, so I get it. But I think we all have this tendency, we get this idea in our minds that we want to be this and we want to do this, right?
Yeah.
And we stick with that, and it's kind of like maybe an immediate gratification thing. And then when we don't get it, we're like,
Mm.
oh, and we tend to either give up or try again. But this time we add enforced, and we really need to do it, kind of thing. So I would say that the best solution to that would be to focus on production, not focusing on products.
Yes.
So
You got a woodshed.
That's a good
Woodshedding
concept.
is what they call it
Yeah.
in drummer circles, because woodshedding and turning wood is probably the same thing. Is you gotta make a couple crappy bowls in order to figure out. And this is another part of creativity, just like anything else in adopting policy in an organization, even is you got to figure out what
Yep.
not to do in order to figure out what to do. But that takes
Mm.
just getting some sort of a product, even if it isn't a stellar product. That's what you're saying.
So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it basically comes down to correcting your way of thinking about the whole thing. It might not necessarily be what you're doing that is incorrect or wrong or whatever. It's focusing on, uh, well, production, because when you're in the zone, it doesn't matter if you're making mistakes and whatever, because you're learning as you're going along. And those things,
Mm.
those things that are actually considered, I guess, negatives, like, oh, I screwed up this and whatever, those are your biggest learning assets, because you cannot learn without adversity.
Yeah, and that's another point that just occurred to me that I think needs to be made.
And time is adversity, just so you know. You might be having a
Mm.
perfectly good, day, and you're creating whatever, but it's constantly motion and change and time.
Well, and this goes back to the last podcast again. Time is the physical universe.
Yeah.
Okay, you as a
Yep.
being are not, and you have to allow for the fact that what you can think, what you can imagine, is you whatever it is that you're trying to be creative at, you can imagine that immediately, that you can
Mm.
do that.
Right. Yeah.
Now, putting it into motion, which is time in the
Yeah.
physical universe, is quite something else.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you get down to the 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hours to be a professional, somebody who makes it look easy. That's something quite different. And you have to allow for you to train the body to move that Apple Pencil, to hold those drumsticks, to play those chords, to use the proper. I mean, it doesn't. All it comes down to is using the proper tools in the right way. And the first proper tool is your body, in order to get the subtle nuances and everything. Musical
I think your
instruments.
mind is first, then your body.
Well, it's state and mind, body.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is you can imagine something and you can go, yeah, I can see myself doing that. But what it entails, training the body to get it to do it, is significantly different. And that's where you tend to because LRH says the only two ways you can be, well, there's two datums. This datum is under or overestimation of effort. We've mentioned this in another podcast. Is that time and time and time again, myself, I've always, because I'm so into that, yeah, let's go create. I'm going to make a website and I'm going to do this and it's going to convey this communication and everything. And then, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours in, the body's going, tired. And, the body is spongy and soft, but the spirit is willing. Okay,
I would like to demonstrate a perfect example of the mu phenomena, guys.
Yeah, right. What's the and that's where I was headed. What is the misunderstanding? The amount of effort and what it's going to take to get a product, let alone the product that you have in your mind, is really something that you have to and I'm saying this not from a viewpoint to stop people. I'm saying this from a viewpoint of you need to prepare yourself and understand that miracles don't always happen with creativity, your creativity, and something that you're interested in overnight. But then again, the reward is the journey, not the destination.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're focusing on effort and it's I mean, is fun effort for you when you go and you play Diablo? It's not. It's I mean.
Well, I mean, what else? I mean, in a video game sense, what else? I mean, when it comes down to it, what are you doing? You're just pressing buttons that are sending electrons to a piece of software.
You're having fun while doing it.
Well, yeah,
right?
I'm having fun while doing it, and it's virtual, and it's not something that I can go out and exchange with anybody else unless I want to sell them my level 100 Diablo account or something like that.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that if you focus on the effort, it's going to take, like, I mean, have you ever stood in a line, right? And you needed to do something, and once this thing was done, you'd get what you wanted, and it would be great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because you have to wait, and there's this time factor, and you're constantly thinking about how many people are in front of you and all that, it becomes tedious. Whereas, when you're doing something you really do enjoy, I mean, like my job, I don't know if everybody can say the same. However, I have done other things in my life where I was like, yeah, this is fun, So that's why I say it all really comes back down to viewpoint.
Yeah.
If you consider something is hard, I mean, all these people that say like these motivational videos on YouTube, you've got to work hard, you've got to want, all that stuff. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Find something you are passionate about.
Right. And that's another point.
It'll just be fun.
Right. And that's the thing is that if you're being creative, it's not work.
Exactly.
It's not work.
It's not.
I mean,
but sometimes it can become work.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's from a musicianship sort of thing, or if it's from, maybe anything, is you've got to develop your chops. Whatever it is that you're doing.
This is the thing, though. We are both fortunate enough to have our own businesses, but other determined creativity, like when you're working for a boss, that can definitely be considered work. But if you're enjoying what you do, it'll certainly make things a whole lot less tedious. Like I when I was young, I used to be a cashier, and I fucking hated that job.
Yeah.
Like everything that came with it.
Well, let's get you
But it was still creative.
yeah, when
Technically.
you first start out, it's counter creative to your goals.
Yeah.
Your goals and your your
Well, it
administrative
is and it
skills.
isn't, and that's the trick that with money. You want to earn money. You want the rewards, but you hate the thing you're doing. Like
Right. What do you learn when you're young? You know what you don't want to do anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to work at McDonald's
yeah.
for 2.5 years. I don't want to work at Applebee's. I don't want to work at Best Buy. I want to be my own boss. And you sit there and go, someday. And then, you know, you finally, as you get older, unless you're really lucky and you just happen to go through the right channels and figure out what to do. And I'd have to say, you know, and this is an interesting point. Our people, our young people, our beings today, do they have more opportunities to be creative?
Oh, this is an OCA question.
Yes, it is. Do they have more opportunities to be creative now than when we and than 30 years ago, 40 years ago?
I'm going to say yes and no.
Yes, I was going to say that too.
Yeah. And my standpoint from it is there's so many things you can't do anymore.
But aren't there other things that you can do that you couldn't do then? The internet didn't exist when I was working at McDonald's in 1985.
Yeah, heaps.
Yeah.
Heaps. Computers have opened the door for so many things.
Maybe
right, well,
I would seem delusional. Sorry, Arthur, but I think that
right.
people firstly can do whatever they want to do because postulates first, you know,
Satan, my body.
Satan creates his own universe, right?
Yeah.
So he can do whatever he wants to do. But the thing is, the opportunities are apparent. People have forgotten what they are. So they just think of themselves as, you know, cogs in the machine, and we're being suppressed, and there's this whole victim thing and not enough opportunity, and you know they're getting down to the solidity, and nobody believed in them enough that they could do things. Nobody taught them to believe in themselves enough so that they could do those things.
Yeah.
So that's why my opinion is yes and no. Yes, they can do well, yes, it is limited, but no, I believe that they can do everything.
Now, I would like to add, I just recently watched a video from Rick Beato on YouTube where he explains what's happened to the music industry, for an example, as a point in this. Did you know that in a good example, a musician who is signed to a record deal makes 9% of the money that comes in? 9% when it's all said and done. 9%. Now, that wasn't that way 30, 40 years ago. There is an example of how things have changed because of the digital medium. And, you know, I mean, I look at that and clearly I'm 56. You know, what I'm not going to be in a world famous traveling band as a drummer or anything like that. I know that. But I'm just saying, you know, opportunities come and go in areas where some things die, other new opportunities come up where you could have somebody could figure out a way around that and have their own website and you know all this stuff. So I mean, it's the sky's the limit. It's just that opportunities in certain areas change. I mean, we were looking at what AI was going to do to clip art.
Yeah. At one stage.
One stage. And what's
and
your
books
viewpoint?
And music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's your guys' viewpoint on you know how things change over time as far as creativity goes in this wise, Artie?
It'll never stop, and it hasn't stopped.
You know, do windows of opportunities
it just continues.
You have to reinvent the wheel and get creative about being creative.
I mean, the cool thing about this earth is it's constantly developing. Yeah, we can say there's a lot of things that are the same. You know, houses are the same, but they're more modernized. cars are the same, but they're more modernized. We're constantly advancing and creating to better. I mean, the idea is to better our lifestyles. And then there is that fear that one day that, we won't exist as well, because our creativity will be the new life form as well,
Mhm.
in a sense. Um,
So does others'
yeah,
creativity drive your creativity because other doors are open while other doors close?
I think it's getting harder in that sense.
This is getting pretty deep,
I
but I
don't,
mean,
and
it's
I don't.
interesting to talk
Yeah,
about.
it is. It's. I'm gonna have to ponder that one.
Okay.
Yep.
Scientology.
Yep.
Okay. Just say that question again.
Well, the whole thing where somebody said to Neil Young, what do you think about other people saying that you're using their chords? Elon
Mm.
Musk comes up with self-drivable cars, and this is something that didn't exist. What, I don't know, Tesla's been around, what, 10 years, something like that. So
Yep.
does others' creativity force you out and into areas that you would not have otherwise?
I think depends on the person, quite honestly. And I'll tell you why, because I had a very good experience with this, and we might have actually touched on this in another podcast. But um, so with the advent of digital, oh, sorry, AI art, there was a period last year where I was beside myself with worry because my sales were going down, and I was like, oh shit, people aren't buying anymore, and it's because of AI art. It must be. And so I got into the lower states, lower down the scales and stuff. I went down to desired, then enforced and inhibited, all of them.
Well, you've been
Um,
refused for a little
yeah,
while.
yeah, yeah. I was like,
Mm.
I'm gonna take a break now. And then there was no. Um, and then I had a bright idea, and I thought to myself, I looked at the situation, and I thought to myself, you know what? It might be that I was creating it. Let's try something. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so I was back there at curiosity again.
Mm-hmm.
And I started creating art just because I thought to myself, I can use this as a form of, I guess, therapy, because I like being creative. It's my hobby, it's my passion. It'll be a good thing for me. And I started coming from that viewpoint. So technically, I guess I was creating more for me than I was for other people or other people's expectations and stuff. And boom, business started doing great again. So I think and it wasn't that, a whole bunch of time had passed and people got over the AI art. No, there's still tons of people who are still using AI art right now.
Mm.
It was just the simple fact that I think it was my state of mind that I was in at that point in time when I was creating. And I can look back and actually go back to the things that I was doing and look at it, and I'm like, yeah, I was not doing good artwork because I was stuck in these lower states, thinking that I needed to push harder, and that just, when you're in that frame of mind, it kills the joy of art, of
Can't have, must
creativity.
have.
Yes, it absolutely
Makes it
kills the
more
joy of
competitive.
creativity,
Yeah.
because you get into like all these things like, oh, now I've got to do this, I've got to try and do art instead of I get to do art.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
that's really what killed things for me at that point. And I'm so thankful that I actually had that experience, so that
Mm-hmm.
I know now where I need to be with creativity. Like if I'm not feeling it for that particular day, I just don't touch it. And
Mm.
I get that not everybody has that same thing because they have to go into work and everything, but yeah.
Well, yeah, when the muse strikes, the muse strikes. And if it's not there, I think by, at least by my own experience, and you and I've talked about it a lot, that give it a rest, reach and withdraw, and the muse will revisit. You just have to give it some time and be patient, and then you'll get inspired
Yeah.
again. So
Mm.
would you say that in keeping with the line of the conversation at this moment, that Do you think that you were inspired by somebody else's create AI mid-journey, the threat of it, and it pushed you in directions that you wouldn't have gone otherwise?
Yeah, I would say so.
Now, this brings, thank you. Does it, Artie, did you have a chance to ruminate over your answer?
Um, so I don't know how to answer it completely, but and I really like what you just said, Lisa, as well. Like, I think that makes a lot of sense when somebody brings their being to something, even if the idea already exists. Making it yours is attractive to people. There's
Mm,
something really honest about um, somebody's own personal creativity, and and that's what makes it different. It's not the intention of being different, but it's just the intention of being you that's
right.
attractive
Thank you.
through art. Yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, I think your example is really good.
thank you. And that, you
Um,
just made me think of something else. About bringing the beingness in, kind of a thing. Well, I'm working with a whole bunch of creatives because they're designers. They take my clip art and create full designs with it, like t-shirt designs or whatever. They put the words with the
mm,
stuff, etc. So when I'm dropping down to those states, right? If I'm at let's say I'm at mild interest on the tone scale, whatever. If you think, okay, maybe this is going into like stuff that isn't Scientological or whatever, but like I like to think that like attracts like. And so if you're vibrating off of a specific frequency or whatever, you're not going to uh, attract those kinds of people that are on the higher vibrational scale, if that makes sense. So like when you're creating art for just the sake, like, okay, yes, he is a physical proponent, but in the theta universe there's also something there.
mm,
So if you're at the bottom and they're at the top being creative themselves, I mean how is that going to help, really?
mm.
Ready?
Well, and you see that in musicianship as well. Um, you can kind of tell somebody that's doing music for work versus somebody that loves what they do.
Yeah.
You know, they're in a band and the band is them. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit of marketing attached to it, like the Beatles, for example. As a band, like they were incredible, and then you add a little bit of marketing to it, where they'd all dress up in the same suits or the same haircuts and that kind of thing. But they came from within as opposed to without. The tools to learn an instrument were available to them, and they learned them,
Mm-hmm.
and they created their own piece of something. And I think like their heart was so attached to what they were doing. Look at the impact it made.
Right.
We could say the same for Elvis. A lot of Elvis's music wasn't even his. It was
Yeah, he
his
did a lot of
version
covers.
of,
Yeah,
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 it was his version of something he knew.
yeah. His create on
Um,
top of it.
yeah, and anybody before him didn't even come close to the recognition of the songs that he produced. But even those people that he was inspired by, they came from something as well that really hit him to drive him to pursue a career in music. Um, and it's interesting, like you were saying as well, Lisa, with the like attracts the like. Um, you might do a bit of clip art. I mean, I'm not into clip art and I don't know anything about it, but let's say I did. I might see a piece in it and I just think, wow, look how she did that. Like that's it. That's just an incredible feeling. And it's probably the feeling that comes first before the logic starts kicking in and you try to use words to explain it. Um, and then that could be me. That could be enough for me to be like, well, all I have to do is just be me.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
boom, magic happens.
yeah. So the
Like incredible magic.
right, and that's where inspiration and creativity meet.
Yeah.
It's at that crossroads where you see or hear or read something and you're like, yeah, I want to do that, but you want to put your own create on it. And so it's interesting how create on one inflow inspires on an outflow as well.
Yeah.
And you want to communicate something in your own way, whether it's a novel or a writer or whatever it is. Inspiration leads to creation.
Right.
And there ain't nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's just how it works, is having other terminals inspire, whether it's technology. Tesla inspired somebody to come up with something else. One thing leads to another, and we're getting to that point of singularity in not just AI, but where you can have a computer or computers agents, as they say now, where you have AI working on a particular topic, trying to figure it out. That's an agent. And then all of a sudden, the technological curve, if you will, goes straight vertical. And that same thing happens where when you're learning about something, can you guys give me examples when you've been creative where that you hit that straight vertical point? What happens there for you where you just take off? Everybody experiences it, but since I'm talking to two creatives, what happens? What happens there where you go vertical and you got this in creativity? What's going on there?
Well, like I said, I kind of, are you talking about long term or just while I'm creating
Well,
something?
there was a turning point where you said, "Hold my beer." You know what I'm talking about, where you have that epiphany that you're like, "Oh yeah, what happened?" And I'm saying this not just for us to be funny and cause an effect on people. I want us, because we're good at articulating these things to other people that are listening to these podcasts, because we're trying to define things that are somewhat elusive
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah.
That and I can't speak for it. I'm sure other people have gotten it across in other ways, but maybe they haven't. So we're trying to be creative in the way that we're presenting the idea of creativity, and this point where you're like, okay, hold my beer. What happened?
I think there was just this actually happened pretty recently though. I was busy drawing something, and I had realized that my style had changed. Now, when I say style, there's kind of two different meanings I have for it. So there's the first one, which and this is probably clip art specific, but there is the brushes that you use, the effects that you use, and all of that stuff, and then there's actually the drawing itself. So whether it's cartoon or realistic or whatever, what I'd noticed was that the the second type that I was doing was completely different from when I first started. My first types of drawings in the clip art world, they were kind of there were elements to them that kind of screamed beginner,
Rudimentary type things.
yeah. And then and it kind of just happened like almost overnight. There was just something I understood about I guess if you want to say what it is, it's maybe golden ratio related, like where it's like the perfect angles, it flows, it's not awkward looking, that kind of thing. And I have a bunch of drawings that I could probably put on, yeah, maybe on the cover image or something, where those drawings were like really awkward versus now they flow. It's really hard to explain if you can't see it, but it literally went from beginner to not.
So it was a little bit of that meme of what I think I'm doing, what others see I'm doing, and what I'm really doing.
I mean, possibly because for me as an artist, like You know, if I had waited until I got to this point, I would have lost out on a lot of money. So like thankfully I just decided, you know what, I'm at the beginning, I want to do this. And I was making money even while I was learning, and I'm still learning.
Mhm.
So
So what
Mm.
happened? What would you call that? What was the realization that there were several turning points and this was just turning point X, and you went, okay, this is an evolution I am experiencing. I can do this, and all is not lost, and these things will happen again, and things will ebb and flow. What was it?
well, honestly, it's kind of anticlimactic because it just sort of sprung on me. Like
Mhm.
it was like one day I didn't know, and the next day I did know. And once you get it, you've got it. And
Mhm.
from that moment, it's like
Yeah.
riding a bike. You've got it.
It
That's the funny part is I don't
is it.
just maybe it's technical ability. Like you just understand.
You have an ARC for it that you didn't have
Mm.
before.
Yeah, but it
Okay.
was like a switch that just happened.
Yeah, Artie.
Sometimes I find it anticlimactic as well when you reach a point. And my example is really simple. It's like I really like Black Sabbath and a particular album, Into the Void, um, the Master Reality album. I love that song, the last track on the album. And as a kid, I used to crank it and I loved it. And then I learned how to play the guitar and then I learned how to play the song. And I was like, oh, is that it? And now every time I listen to the song, all I see is numbers and shapes. So
Right.
kind of it undid something for me.
You
And
as
like
is it.
even playing music, yeah, and then even playing music. I mean, I still love the album, but I can't listen to it with the same joy before I knew how to play any of the songs.
So there was
As
would you
as
that's an interesting way
Yep.
to put it. So there was somewhat of a transcendence at the point of as isness. Is that what you guys are saying,
I y- mm, possibly, yeah.
Artie?
Yeah, possibly is yeah, I agree possibly. But then on the other side of it, I went through a period where I was really interested in electricity. And how electrical circuits worked and this and that. So I went and bought some kits. I studied, I spent heaps of time reading, watching videos, and then I actually built a circuit from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I carved out the card and everything. Um, and then it wasn't until I actually and I attempted this circuit for at least 10 times. I had to learn how to solder properly through the process. I had to learn, what all the electrical components were, what they did, why they were placed the way they were placed, so on and so on and so on. And then
Mm-hmm.
after I built this thing, I had the massive realization of why they call it a circuit
Hmm.
because it starts at one point and literally ends at the other. But it goes through this incredible maze of things
Mm-hmm.
before it ends up at the start point again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then when I reached that point, I was really settled with my exploration. It was like literally like, again, the MUs, the misunderstood of what a circuit was. I could have probably just cleared what the word was and then not even bothered with going through all that
Mm-hmm.
to some degree.
Hmm.
Um, but I learned a lot during that process. And now that I've achieved it, in the back of my mind, I'd like to build another one, but then it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, and the driving force for me isn't that great that I want to do it again. But if I wanted to, I could, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy with that. So
Mm-hmm.
I've reached a state in one exploration where I'm content.
Scientologirl, you look like you had something you wanted to say. No?
Oh, well, I did think of something while he was talking. Firstly, that's super cool that you actually did that, Arthur. I really like, I mean, learning
It
circuits
took
and
a
stuff, that's
lot of
pretty
effort
cool.
and a lot of
Again,
money
learning
too.
curve.
Right, right.
Uh,
But was it fun while you were doing it?
the drive was to make it work, and I built probably, to build one of them would take me probably 3-4 hours of just constant concentration, and then
Mm.
I'd get to the point where I'd be so excited, I'd plug the battery in and nothing.
Oh no.
Nothing.
I,
So I'd start
I,
again
yeah, I had a similar
and
thing when I
nothing.
was a
And then I'd
kid.
start again.
Yeah.
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 But the day I got one working, I was like, fuck yeah, I did it. And then I built more. Like I built like half a dozen of these little units, and then it was actually like a healing device. And I went off the schematic for it, and then I gave it away to heaps of people after that. So I got to share it, my creation as well,
Mm.
which was pretty cool.
You were saying?
Yeah.
Uh, well, I was thinking of something, and it's a little bit maybe off topic, but where does uh where does destruction come into creation? Because if you look at the tone scale,
Um,
right, at the tops of the tone at the top of the tone scale, you have all of those creative zones, and then at the bottom there's more sort of destructive. So I guess maybe past disinterest there could be some creativity or something. But I also think that destruction is also creation. It's just probably
that's right.
unless you're doing
Yeah.
it for a good purpose, it's aberrated
Yeah.
creation.
He mentions that in the
Yeah.
axioms. Hubbard does about,
I had a great idea.
that's that's the thing is, he says artists have a hard time stopping because they want to just keep creating and changing and making it better and making it better, but at some point you have to stop your creation. But there's also the larger arc is, and like in Artie's example, um he kind of end phenomena the end of it and then went on to something else, and that's a bit of a destruction itself. Do I want to continue on this line, or
Mm,
have I achieved what I wanted to achieve? And you move on to some other interest or project or whatever. One could say the even larger arc is one lifetime to the next. You've achieved all these things in one
mm,
lifetime, and now you move on to another lifetime in a totally different place, and you're doing something different. I was going to also add, from my viewpoint, the older I get, the more I look at what do I want to put my time into based off of the things that I've done in the past that are similar. Is it worth the investment
yeah.
of the learning
Yeah.
curve to get into some new endeavor, making bowling balls from scratch or whatever it is? How long is it going to take? What's it going to cost? All of the searching and all of that stuff, because the creativity part is the shorter end of the stick. It's learning how to be that creative that takes the longest time, in my estimation.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is that's because the physical universe is
Yeah.
so slow. Like Hubbard says, the physical universe and the speed of it is like watching a snail cross the lawn on a hot summer's day. Whereas a thetan is like now, 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 now. You can think of whatever, but putting it into motion in the physical universe is where the quote unquote slow magic happens.
Right.
That's the hard part to deal with for me is whether it's learning a new game, and what if it's a video game. I just recently got back into video games, but do I really want to spend 40 hours learning how to master a video game? And the thing for me, I don't know about you guys, the thing for me is, what's the prize at the end of the rainbow? Is it worth it? Do I want to
An
spend that
achievement.
time?
Well,
Yeah.
then you're kind of
Yeah.
again going back into those like desired things, you know.
Yeah. I mean, to me now, the most important thing is, I don't know. It seems more, and this is weird because I'm being contrary, but I always go back to education. What can I learn, as opposed to me
Mm,
wasting 80, 120 hours playing a video game? I could be learning something
But
new.
we do it anyways.
Right. And that was
yeah.
that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was my
Yeah.
point. It's a really strange confluence, but you do it
Yeah.
anyway. Oh,
Yeah.
isn't that interesting?
I found I found in those kinds of cycles, um, it's like the waiting room in a sense.
Yeah.
So you're playing the game, but then while you're playing the game and you're thinking all these things and you're contemplating all the things, inverted commas, you should be doing, one of them will pop into your head and you'll be like, that's it. And you'll probably put the game down and then go focus on that thing you really want to do, as opposed to giving yourself a hard time on the
Mhm.
things you should be doing.
Don't
That little
encourage my
driving force
ADHD,
will just
Arthur.
because I go through similar phases where I'm just laying dormant. It's you do so many things in your life and you try out so many different things, and then you just sort of stop, and you're twiddling your thumbs. It's like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And then out of nowhere, something will just appear, and then you'll be all over it.
And then the muse is there going,
And
you wanna.
but I have to say, I do admire people that take one thing and enjoy it to the end. Like say
Oh
somebody
God,
who makes
yes.
furniture by hand, and they start from a young age, and they're in their 60s, 70s, still enjoying that one thing. I totally admire that because I'm not like that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that
Yeah.
too. So much.
Well, and this brings me to another point. It's intelligent is I'm going to pose it as a question. Is intelligence a double-edged sword as a creative?
Yes, I think so.
Why?
Well, because you're
Oh,
fucking second guessing yourself all the time, I think.
Well,
You
that's
know?
one aspect, and that's true,
And sometimes
I think.
I think because we're well, I don't want to speak for myself, but th- I think
Speak
when
for others or for yourself.
oh, I don't want to say that I'm smart because I'm probably not. No, I'm kidding. But I'm also not going to be egotistical about it. But um, I would say that it's difficult because you kind of it's that OCA question, know before going kind of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I guess it's the result rather, but
Well, do you get bored? I mean, you brought up quote unquote ADHD.
okay.
Okay, as a creative and you're intelligent, do you give up on creating things when you go, nah, I got this figured out, fuck it, and move on to
Yeah.
something? Is that what? Because that's kind of what I was getting from Artie. Is he's like, I've EP'd it, I'm over it, I've seen that I can do this, and other people, they'll go out and do wood turning for 30 years, and the subtle
mm,
nuances on it, and it trips their trigger to the end, and or I mean,
Well,
you figured it out and you move on, or what's going on there,
well,
guys?
well, here's the thing, right?
mm,
With somebody who's long term doing that,
Yeah.
okay, I would assume that the person is not just going to make one thing and paint it the same color for the rest of his life. So in that way, you've got to change it up because otherwise there are no barriers. It is
That's true. Yeah.
it's not sustainable to have that. So even with my line of work, um I mix it up and I change things and I add things and I learn new styles and new brushes and all that stuff. Like even now, I'm instead of just doing clip art, I'm considering doing design work, making the completed designs with my clip art. So like you have to constantly grow with it,
So what
and
you're
you
telling
take your passion and then you add to it.
so right. So what you're telling me
mm.
is in the within the confines of the concepts of creativity, you're playing a game.
Yes.
Artie, you do you view it the same way? I mean, or do you just go, I figured it out next? I figured it out next. Is it that way?
I mean, for me in my head, it is that way. Um, and I think money or financial gain from it can be a really big influence too.
Yes.
Um,
The
so
the
when I
validation
first
of
got
it.
my wood lathe, no more, if you're relying on an ability to gain financially from it, I think it can take away a lot of the essence um, from your work as well.
Is that
And
what
I'm
you
not
thought
saying that
he meant?
completely.
I thought he meant it as in it could be a good motivation.
Okay, I just
So
wanted to clear that up. Sorry to interrupt, Artie.
Okay, yeah, it could work that way as well. I mean, and I can only speak from my own experiences, but when I first got my wood lathe, I wanted to make pendulums. I wanted to make a wooden pendulum because everywhere, because I go
Neat.
to a lot of psychic expos,
Yeah.
and people do, they sell already made crystal pendulums with chains. So I always had a bit of affinity with wood, and so in my head, it was like, I might try a wood pendulum. So just to get to that point required me to buy a wood lathe, to buy the tools, to actually give it a go. Because I tried sanding, I tried carving, I tried all that stuff, and I just wasn't getting the product I wanted. And then so I ended up spending quite a lot of money just to get to the point of being able to make a really nicely shaped
Pendulum.
pendulum. And then I had to somehow attach a chain to it, so on and so on. And so I'd make these and I take them to expos with me whenever I go to an expo and I sell them. Um, and now I book into an expo and it's like, oh, I've only got 20 left. I'm going to have to make some more. I've only got 10 left now. I need to make more. I need to. So now I've got this I need to voice going on.
yeah.
But the funny thing is, when I get onto the wood lathe, um, the effort of getting onto it because now it's some kind of work. But once I start, my passion reignites the moment the chisel hits the wood.
Yes.
And then my creative turns on again. But it's that point of getting to the wood lathe,
Right.
turning
Because
it on,
yeah.
starting the project, and then everything turns on, and it's just like, oh, I remember this feeling. I remember how much fun this was, and then I'll be stuck there for hours. I'll spend a
Mm.
whole day on the lathe, but just getting to it is just like, oh God, I need to dedicate time to this. I need to do this. I need to. I need to. I need to. I need. I need. I need.
Yeah, I've had that definitely.
You were going to say?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
So this comes back to your point, Arthur, is what is that? What is that where you're like, how getting to that point?
It looks like you have a point to make.
Well, I really don't have an agenda on this. I just find it interesting in the directions that it goes that we can talk about in the podcast, that I know that anybody that's listening to this podcast later on, once we publish it, is going to go, oh yeah, that.
Mm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Because every single person that listens to this podcast has experienced this in some walk of creative life.
I just call it the zone. You're in the zone.
You're right, but I mean,
Yep.
our purpose, and I'm just fumbling for words here because I'm thinking so much faster than I can talk, is it's very rare that you get to hear somebody from a Scientological standpoint or viewpoint talk about this sort of thing. We tend to listen to Hubbard talk about this stuff, and we don't get to talk amongst ourselves about it to one another. And we have an interesting opportunity to cover all of these points of creativity because there are so many points where, I mean, getting yourself to be creative, like, well, you said about motivation. Okay, I've got to get up. I got to sit down at my desk. I got to grab my iPad, grab my Apple Pencil, open the app. What am I going to do? And Artie, you were saying, but with the pendulums and stuff like that, getting there is hard. Why? Why is it hard?
Well, one thing I've learned, because I've always been interested in things, not one thing, but lots of things. I'm just a curious person. And I have to say, at this stage in my life, after learning the study tech, it's actually really changed how I approach things. And I probably achieve more now. Prior to that, just learning gradients, the mass. I'll actually spend the time now to research something more thoroughly before I start putting my hands to it. And it actually increases the speed of me learning, as opposed to, just getting into it. Let's see what happens. And if I go back in time, if I knew that, like if I knew the study tech when I was younger, maybe my attitude would be very different towards projects.
Well, and that leads us back to what I was heading in the direction of as far as intelligence is the more intelligent you are, the quicker you see the trees for the forest and you go, no, I get it. And then you move on. And so does that blunt your creativity when you figure out the quote unquote matrix of it all and you're like,
No,
okay, been there, done that. I don't need to do this anymore. Oh wait, I made money with it, and then it becomes drudgery.
it actually gives me the confidence to do other things as well, to do
Well,
more.
I find that to be the case myself. You
Yeah.
you look like you have something you want to say.
Well, okay. I will probably be very honest here and say that for me, going back to the motivation thing, money is a great motivator. So I've found something that I really, do enjoy doing. But there are times that I'm just like, you know what, I could use a break. And so I just kind of let it go and then go and do something else. Now, when I was younger, I would do all kinds of creative things. So, like, I would make things from clay, or I would paint with actual
Different
fabric
mediums.
paint. Then I would, I would even do the sewing of the pillows so that we have a, fabric painted pillow, and lots of things. Whereas now, I think when I'm older, I would like to do those kinds of things, but they don't really serve a purpose because I have, the business and it brings me money, kind of a thing. Um, so I would say that in a way you are right, because I do know how. I wouldn't say I know everything about art by any means, but I have reached a point at certain times where I'm like, I wish I could just put this down and go play, go create something that I want to create. Um, so yes, that does happen. I mean, I remember so many times within this business where I was like, yeah, this is gonna be great. This is my style now. I've settled. I'm never gonna change it. This is fucking
I
amazing.
remember you saying that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
especially early
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
My style,
My
my style,
style.
my
You got
style, my
so
style.
annoyed.
And I'm like, oh.
Yep.
But then eventually I was just like, it doesn't take me long, like maybe a week of that, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm bored. I need to do something different.
Right. And that brings up the point.
Yeah.
Challenge versus intelligence. Are they the same thing? As you figure it out in being creative, is it your intelligence that drives you forward to find out more and curious on the CDEI scale? Curious, desired, enforced, inhibited, no and refused. Above that is understand and know on that scale, KUCDEINR on Hubbard scale. Does your intelligence get in the way, and you get and this brings up the B word, boredom, to where you've got it so figured out that you need to continually be challenged in order to be creative in an area, or you're like Artie said, he moves on to something else and something else and something else and something else.
It's as simple as, look, we can use whatever words we want, but it's as simple as a Thetan needs a game. And without any barriers, as
You
in
got nothing.
barriers to understanding, you got nothing. So once you have it, you're kind of set. But with regards to challenge and intelligence, I would say that I have seen people who are novices at art, and they are still doing the same sort of similar art, trying to perfect it, but it is very slow for them. Versus, I mean,
You're talking about aptitude,
yeah,
whether they have the aptitude to advance in their
right.
skill set and keep improving and keep improving and keep improving, or they're static and they just stay the same.
And for me, because I'm skilled at something. I definitely wouldn't understand what, anything to do with woodwork
or circuit
or
boards.
circuit boards.
Mm-hmm.
But because of
Yep.
of my niche, I think to myself, oh, I can just help them improve, and I'll make a few tutorials, and they'll watch it, and they'll be as good as me. I've even literally had that fear almost, like, what if they do use my technique and they out
Yeah,
create
yeah,
me,
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of a thing. But that just hasn't
There's
happened
only one of
because,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, there's
And
only one of you.
it
Yeah.
has been really seamless and easy for me. But that's the thing again. I think I also try to always make it new. In fact, it's not even a try. It just happens when I get bored, quite honestly. And so I guess in that way, people
Mm,
can't really keep up. But even besides that, the fact is that yes, I do think intelligence, aptitude, um, even talent plays a role in that, natural talent.
Mhm.
mm,
Then again, I honestly don't feel like talent is a thing. I feel like it's just you've done it enough, and you have a passion towards it, and you're intelligent enough, and that's how you create further. Because if I look, I have two talents. I started drawing when I was 4, and I started drinking.
I started drinking when you were 5.
yeah, yeah,
Drawing when I
I'm
was
South
4,
African.
and singing when, wow.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking. I thought it was funny.
And singing when I was 14. And I'm way better at art than I am at singing. So for
Mm.
me, it's just like it's something that you've done, that whole 10,000 hours thing kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Party thoughts?
I think they're both separate concepts, but they both work together. One can't work without the other, because your intelligence will increase as you're learning, but you need the intelligence to start learning. And so while you're intelligently learning, your intelligence increases. like one
One
can't
thing
work
begets
without the other
another.
in this particular, yeah, and it can't work outside. I mean, we're talking about creativity, and but then again, kids are creativity. Um, hmm. You know what? I'm going to take back everything I said to some degree, but
Mhm.
I still believe they both work together. Imagine, you see the caveman first carves out a round stone, and they use it as a tabletop, and then they realize their intelligence increases. Oh, hang on, you know, the wheel came from a carved stone. So their intelligence did increase, and then that one shape has changed the lives for all of us.
Mhm.
And it started from somewhere, but did it take intelligence or creativity to carve the first round stone?
It's a great question.
Chicken or the egg.
Satan, mind, body. Well,
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah,
Yeah.
the physical universe is one big box of clay, and
Mm.
what you can do with it is limited only by your imagination. And one thing begets another. Whether you see yourself, you carve out the tabletop, and then you go, wait a minute, we got a wheel on our hands. It fell off the pedestal and started
Yeah.
rolling, and you went, oh, well, that's new.
Or maybe his best
Yeah.
friend said, hey, this can be used as a wheel.
Yeah.
And there you get
Yeah.
the Alexander Graham Bells of the world, and the what's that guy?
Tesla,
No, well, yes, but no, the Microsoft guy, Bush, no,
uh,
Bill Gates, yeah,
Bill,
that,
Bill Gates,
yeah,
Jobs.
the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
thieves.
yeah, yeah. And one, I mean, Apple and Microsoft grew up together, basically. I mean, they
Mm,
one thing
mm,
fed off of the other, and one guy did vanilla, and the other guy did chocolate.
Yeah.
And that's creativity is as well. So I mean, there's a lot of creativity that goes into creativity on different flows. Others to you, you to others, others to others, you to yourself.
Mm.
And it, I mean, we could
mm,
talk about this for hours and hours,
Yeah.
and it will inspire people to do other things, and that is the beauty of a thetan and theta is the more discourse you have about things, the more creativity you free up. And that is, the solution to the problem is further communication. And that is what creativity is. It's just manifesting ideas into the physical universe, whether it's I will have a family, or I will create the greatest painting ever, or whatever type of a thing. But we all bounce off of each other as well, which is a really neat thing.
I really like the thought
And
of postulates. Sorry, Arthur.
No, that's all right.
I was just gonna say I really like the there's the physical aspect of the things you do and the things you're being and stuff, but there's also this big thing that comes prior to everything else, which is postulates, and how things just sort of align when you have your postulates there, and if you like,
which
if
is
you
not indicative of the physical universe
yeah,
all the time.
and the when I say postulates, I literally mean the definition, which is a self-created truth.
Yeah.
So it is there before it's even there in the physical universe. Like, you're going to get it. It's just a matter of time. And you're putting a create there. That's the first thing.
Arthur?
I really enjoy this word. And I remember some time ago, I actually spent some time around this word just for myself, and there's a lot I realized about it. First, you start with create, so an idea, and then you go into creating, which then goes into creativity while you're creating, which then goes to created, the end product, which goes back to the first word, create. But it's pretty cool because the process starts, in your mind first. If I wanted to build a table, I do the creativity, the creating, and the creation all in my mind before I bring it into the physical world using my physical body. Because then I'd have to get creative about finding the kind of wood I wanted. I'd have to get creative about the tools I use. I'd have to get creative about where I was going to do it, how I was going to do it, measuring it, blah, blah, blah. All these steps that are involved in this initial create to get to the final create from the non-physical, bringing it into the physical. And sometimes it works out just as you imagine it. And then other times the physical universe will push you in a different direction to potentially something better or a big mess. And it's a really interesting process when you break down all the stages just this one word has: create, creating, creativity, creation. They're all very powerful words, and they all have their place in one process, start to finish. It's a really powerful word, this word.
Yeah,
it is. And in what you were describing, it's sort of like what Hubbard says about, if you can't put it into the physical universe in the form of a clay demo or a sketch, then you don't understand it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's very much that way. And you have to, well, okay, go back to the drawing board. Okay, go back to the drawing board, especially if you're dealing with something scientific. There's going to be a lot of start, change, stop going on for you to figure out how to do something, because there are lots of cycles within cycles within cycles and so on in order to figure out how to do something. I mean, you can only, the postulate is how to create an anti-gravity device. Well, there's probably a couple tens of thousands of cycles inside there in order to figure out how to do that. But a thetan can do it, and thetans have done it.
Yep.
And that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
That type of a thing. And anything can be resolved and done if you want to. It's just a matter of, do you have the inclination and the creativity and drive to do it? But it all starts with a postulate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
even Nikola Tesla. Oh, sorry. Like
No,
even Nikola Tesla, he would say that he'd create a device in his mind, make it work in his mind first before he bothered even putting it
based off of what he already knew.
into reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he'd create it completely in his mind, mathematical, the way this would operate, that, the way this would react to that, so on and so on. And then he would put his hands to it. But up until that point,
Wouldn't
interesting
bother.
fellow, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This conversation has really highlighted how amazing tools like the admin scale are.
Yeah.
Because the admin scale is
Mm.
technically it's a demonstration of what is going to happen if you follow it, of course.
Provability of ideation, postulation.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were saying something, I think, I can't remember now, but it was like, yeah, it's like statistics. For example, I don't know about you, but I've sometimes made an admin scale, and I'm like trotting along, and everything's going great, and then I get to something like ideal scenes or statistics, and I'm like, oh shit, I don't have this correct because I haven't done it right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got to go back and redo it until everything aligns. So that just shows you that you might
That's right.
it's an underestimation of effort, because in your mind you're like,
that.
yeah, this is like perfect, it's going to work. But if you don't look at it and make sure that everything aligns, something's going to go wrong.
Yeah, well, it always
it
always kind of comes down to that big portcullis gate called what's really required.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I got to go back to goals, purposes, policies, plans, programs, and then oh well, shit. All right, now we march back up the admin scale.
Yeah.
And then you have to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the list gets shorter and shorter and shorter. Finally, you get through the portcullis and over the moat and out of the castle you go. And you're like, okay, let's build another castle. And or whatever the endeavor is. But yes, you're right. Statistics and a valuable final product. Well, I didn't think of that. I just took off on create.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Come on back.
Yeah.
And then you get confused things, like your valuable final product could be in your goals section and the other way around, or like your plans or your programs, and it just gets so confusing sometimes.
The devil very much can be in the details, because research is required on a lot of things unless you're Nikola Tesla and you're involved in an area that you know so well. I mean, what a brilliant mind it is and was to be that being that could do that sort of a thing and be so copied.
Yeah.
Duplication is the greatest form of flattery.
Yeah.
Type of a thing, and how his ideas, we would not have modern technology as we know it if it weren't for that one crossroads
100%.
with that one, I mean it, one individual. But the thing is you have to broaden that out and go, so many things would not exist because of a one individual. And that is the beauty of creativity and the admin scale, is that somebody had the fortitude to carry on to get to a point where they could get the idea of something in their mind before they would ever put it out there. There are a lot of individuals in different areas. The guy that created Procreate, for example, or the group, or it's an Australian company, by the way. I mean, you just go on and on and on and on, how one thing leads to another. And there's this beautiful tapestry, macrame work of design in the physical universe, where all these things are intertwined to make these knots, and then they go off in different directions. That gives us the known physical universe, at least on this planet. What a wonderful thing that Thetans are, that they can cross produce and inspire and create and just wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. That's what drives everybody. It drives me, it drives you guys. And I've really enjoyed this podcast a lot. I love talking about this type of a thing because, it's a craft in and of itself to talk about crafting other things, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or the ideation thereof.
Yeah.
So,
and it's interesting how
go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to add to it. It's interesting how doing something can give you a greater nourishment than food, in a sense.
Then this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. Eating,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, yeah. You only eat because you need to eat while you're being creative. Otherwise, you'll fall asleep and pass out.
Right. Yeah.
But
You have
while
to
you're
keep.
creating, you're so alive. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's beaming.
Yeah. You were gonna say?
Yeah.
I I know we don't have much time, and this could probably make a whole podcast on itself, but the effect of uh, things like uh, dopamine, drugs, that kind of thing on
Mm.
creativity
Mhm.
is huge.
Oh yeah, I mean
Ooh.
without a doubt, because the thrill physically in a with a thetan in a body of the dopamine that you get. I mean, that's the purpose of the body is to push you on the dopamine of catching the food that you're going to eat, and you're like, yeah, I have to do this. It's the reward for the body and the physical universe to keep things going. Whereas the postulate that a being makes pushes the body to get the dopamine to get the product.
Right. But what I also mean
Mm.
is like it can stunt you because
Yes.
I mean there there have been times when, you know, I've just been satisfied. Like I've had a good meal, I've had my vape, I've had my coffee, and you know, the last thing I'm thinking of is doing something, is drawing something, because I've already had that replacement, kind of, you know, there isn't that motivation there.
Mm.
So, I mean, there's so many motivational speakers out there that say start your day right. If you're going to start it, for example, I got into this thing where I was watching my series early in the morning with my breakfast, and then afterwards, because I was enjoying that series so much, and it's chilled, it's relaxed, you know,
Mhm.
I was like, I don't feel like drawing now. So this is why it's so important to start your day right as well. um because and that's, I see you looking at
I,
me like, yeah,
I was
that's,
just going to say something to you that you tend to mention a lot.
yeah,
The problem that becomes the further the solution that becomes the further problem.
yes,
Interesting
Mm.
when it comes
Mm.
to create, isn't it? That you create, counter create, create, counter create, create, counter create. So your altar is
Mm-hmm.
on an
right.
altar is on an altar is, and
Because
that.
once you've got the havingness, I mean, honestly, I'm gonna say havingness destroys beingness. It
Yep.
can.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that is the counter create on top of the create that the body does. The body, for lack of a better word, is lying to you, going, doesn't it feel so good
Yeah.
that you're like, yeah, I'm
Mm.
gonna chase that devil.
And that's the thing. It
Mm.
is the difference between pleasure versus happiness.
Yes, and you have to watch out for
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
You have to watch out for that because
And they are different.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
They're very
they all
different.
smack a
Yeah.
little bit differently, and before you know it, you're off in the forest somewhere and can't figure out what direction you came from and what's
Yeah.
north.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful.
Yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
almost everybody starts their day that way. They start, like, if you think about the coffee drinkers, I can't, because, but I would, because every time I do, I get arrhythmia issues. But um
Mm.
with coffee, I mean, how many people are daily having their caffeine, which is one drug, with their sugar, which is another? Sometimes they'll have a mochaccino, like my
Crazy. Yeah.
favorite, you know. So they start their day that way, and that could actually, even though it might, you know, wake people up a bit, it might actually be counterproductive to their survival, because when they go into work, they've had all this dopamine and everything, and then it's time to work, you know.
Yeah, I think
You
that
know,
this comes back. Go ahead, Arthur.
could I just chime in?
Sure.
And it's really really interesting. You talk about the coffee like that. I think coffee is more of a tool for work. Because if I go away on holiday somewhere and I'm completely relaxed, I don't even worry about coffee. It's
Mm.
it's not a thing. But then when I'm under pressure, I have to get up. I have to go to work. My first thing of the morning is going and getting a coffee on my way to work. And then I'll drink coffee while I'm at work. And then I get home, I'm in my own space where I can be creative. And very rare, I'll stop and have a coffee when I'm in that state. And so
Mm.
it's interesting the connection you've made there around coffee and
Yeah.
doing
So
stuff.
it's almost like a bit of a relief while you're working kind of a thing.
In a sense, yeah, it's like you need the energy because you have to do it. So I'll have a coffee. The logic is really simple,
Yeah.
really simple. There's yeah,
But doesn't this come back to the admin scale a little bit, though?
How so?
How you go about things and the pitfalls that you've run into that you might know about yourself. And I guess ultimately what I'm saying is you you know the body is a tool to get the desired result that you want in the physical universe.
Mm-hmm.
Period. That's and to play those games.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive to let the body lead you off into the forest and you can't find your path back because of the drives that the chemical compounds that the body creates that push it on, because you have to have some agreement with the body. If you're tired, you don't feel so creative, you're like, all right, I'll get you some sleep. And this is the way that I
yeah,
look at it is the body gets in the way. You have to give it rest. If you could work on a creative project, and some people do, they'll stay up 24 hours. They're so driven. I'm not one of those people. But if you're really into something, you can force the body to do it, but it does draw you down. And once you know
mm,
the pitfalls of that particular body that you have, and they do vary, then you make that part of your admin scale, and that way you steel yourself against running into those pitfalls.
Yeah. Well, there's
mm,
honestly so much that that you could include. That's just one sort of effect that you'll have to contend with is your body. Then there's other personalities, and to be making a successful, well, making an admin scale successful
Mm-hmm.
in the physical universe. So.
I'll give you a prime example from my own experience. When I was talking to Arthur about being in a band and everything, we went out and played in the middle of the summer in July, and you were around for this.
Yeah.
I went out and I made the mistake of giving it my all on a hot July summer evening, and I went way too far in giving it my all, and I overheated.
mm,
And I had to go sit with a cold towel on my forehead for half an hour, and the band had to take a break. And I exceeded the body's limits as a drummer on a humid night at the age of 54. And I kind of let myself down, and I wasn't getting the product at the end, though I did recover a little
mm,
bit. But later that night, I had the worst cramps the body has ever had in my legs. The
mm,
worst cramps. I was
I remember that.
screaming. It hurt so bad because I was so deprived of water and potassium.
Yeah.
And I'm not, poor me or victim or anything like that. But it is something that you have to take into consideration, that the body is, it is the car that you drive in order to achieve your results in the physical universe. And dopamine
yeah,
is an issue. All of these things
Yeah.
you have to take into consideration in order to ultimately get the products that you want to get. You have to pace yourself, and above all else, you need to know the limits the body has. I'm not going to say your limits, because your limits are not, that's not the big picture. Your limits with the body's limits, not your limits. They're
Yeah.
different. I want to separate those things out. Fate and mind, body, product.
Mm.
mm,
And it's
mm,
important to know that, which I think is to your point, that you have to schedule that out and put it into the administrative scale, that pacing yourself or something like that in order to do the things that you want to do is something you have to take into consideration as a creative being.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, good point,
Thank you.
guys. So in closing,
that's good fun.
we're getting a little long here. Any last closing thoughts or words of advice or words of wisdom for our listeners before we finish our 100th episode?
Start your day right and that will definitely help you. That's it.
Right. Put that into your
Mm,
admin scale. Know what you should do. And there's a difference between what you can do and what you should do. That's
Mm.
ethics. Ethics is
mm,
reason.
Mm-hmm.
And first dynamic ethics as a creative person are of the utmost importance to your happiness,
Mm.
which is having your ethics in, and be as creative as possible, but you know, do it appropriately and have good policies. Don't
Mm.
overdo it. Let the muse hit you. Don't create crappy products. And above all else, in my opinion, read LRH's art series.
Well,
mm,
just real quick, I just want to say that if you didn't have the expectation of your band members and all the people over there and whatever, you would have probably realized, because there's no way you can overheat that much and not feel, hey, I need to slow down. So what I'm thinking is that there was all this expectation, and you wanted to make a good impression, and you didn't want to fail your band members and stuff like that. So I think it's important to sort of realize that it wasn't as if it was like this was more other determined than it was self-determined.
Yeah, well, I
So
should have practiced to practice. I
the
had not taken into consideration doing something in an unair conditioned environment.
right.
I
So
underestimated the amount of effort.
so then
I
it's
think is the way it was one of the two.
yeah, so then it's almost as if it was like maybe it's not that I'm trying to say without saying that it's not really a policy thing, because if you're having fun and you're,
Mhm.
then things will magically align kind of a thing.
Well, I mean, that's what the admins, that's why I brought it up,
Yeah.
is the admin scale was where everything is in agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, hard won experience would say, make sure you have enough potassium, don't overdo it, pace yourself.
Right.
I had a wisecrack from one of the guys in the band who was a marathon runner. And I told him what, Clem Burke from the band Blondie had said, that an hour's worth of drumming is 7.5 miles of running, and he was like, "Please," and I was like, "Bitch, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. No,
You
he was
play a
just being a
guitar." He
critical
just
asshole.
Yeah, and I just I mean,
mm,
and you run into these things, but I mean, again, experience is experience in dealing with personalities and tone levels and all this stuff. Scientology really, really freaking helps sort out all of these complexities. I
Yeah.
mean, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's incredible how much of this
mm,
stuff I
it
apply
is.
moment by moment. And I look back on that and go, things I would have done differently. Well, there's about 10 or 15
Mm,
policies that I would put into place. But that just comes from experience in the physical universe. And that's the liability of creativity,
Yeah.
really.
mm,
So
mm.
anything else?
Yep.
Get out of here.
Um, I think when you pursue creativeness, a very dear friend of me, a very dear friend of mine pointed this out to me many years ago, because I was giving myself a hard time um, when learning an instrument, and I've always stuck by this since I heard it. He said, "Consider the difference between perfection and awesomeness. Just be awesome."
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Because,
and that's
absolutes
stuck
are
with me ever
unobtainable.
since.
Yeah. And
Yep.
another thing is that don't be so hard on yourself when you're using a body, because
Mm,
not every day is going to be the same when you're doing creativity in the physical universe. And you're going to have patience, and you should admire and take care of that body so that you can continue to do that. And you can't expect the same results every day because there are so many variables at hand.
Right.
And the best thing to
yes,
do is
and
get yourself in the best case shape you can. What were we going to say, Arthur?
I have to say, doing this Purif has brought in a reality I never expected around my body, and I'm blown away at how my body has done as much as it has up to this point.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
I've
blown
said the
away.
same thing
Like,
you
I have
have.
a new love and appreciation for my body.
Yeah, yeah. You look
Yeah,
at it and you go, "What a workhorse! This thing and
yeah,
everything I put it
yep,
through, I just can't believe it's been here and kicking and screaming, but still putting up with it.
yep.
What a companion!"
it still
you know,
wakes up.
that horse,
It
you know.
still wakes up.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you know, you look back at the
Uh,
guys in well, from where I'm from in Missouri, they used to have the Pony Express, where these guys delivered the mail. In Kansas City was the Westport, they called it at the time, and it's actually an area in Kansas City where these guys would leave Westport on this pony, and they would drive that pony so hard, running for hours
mm,
until they got to the next point, and then that pony would be exhausted, almost near
yeah.
death, and then they would pick up another pony and do the same thing. This is how they got the mail to
Yeah.
California, Washington, and Oregon, and all that. You know, I mean, it's very similar to what you're doing with the body, and you have to
Mm,
appreciate and take care of it. And I'm gonna get a little airy fairy here. Take care of that temple, because it is your
mm,
via for everything that you do, and you can't audit without a body
yeah.
at this point in the
Yeah.
game. You need it, so take care of it, and you can't be creative without of it. Reach and withdraw. Be creative, withdraw. Be creative, withdraw. That's my advice.
Mm.
I think you guys would probably say the same thing, but maybe not as wordy.
Yeah. I agree, John. I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. So we hope you enjoyed this podcast. I'm done being wordy, and it's our 100th podcast. And thanks for being here and listening to these
Whoa.
podcasts. 100 is a big number in the amount of hours and everything like that. So we very much appreciate you guys, and we hope you got a lot out of this. And we can't wait to see the products that you create, being a creative Thetan in this interesting physical universe. Namaste,
Mm,
and we love you. Bye bye.
Gonna be awesome.